A single dead waiter was fired for helping a veteran's dog, and minutes later, Marines stormed the café. The diner is packed wall to wall with them now. 30 men and women in uniform and civilian clothes, standing shoulder to shoulder. Arms crossed. Silent. The air is thick with controlled fury. Vincent Caruso stands behind the counter, phone trembling in his hand. His face is pale. Sweat beads at his hairline. He's surrounded. The lunch crowd that was here 20 minutes ago? Gone. They don't have to. Their presence alone has turned this small-town diner into something that feels like a tribunal. And standing directly in front of Caruso is a Marine Brigadier General in full-dress uniform, ribbons gleaming across his chest, gray hair, 62 years old. The kind of authority you don't question. His voice is quiet, measured, cutting. "Do you know who you just fired?" Caruso stammers. He tries to say something about an employee, about policy, about rights. The general doesn't blink. "That man you humiliated in front of your customers? That man is a Marine Corps legend." The room seems to shift. The Marines behind the general stand a little straighter. Caruso's mouth opens. Nothing comes out. One of the Marines near the door, a woman in her 30s, holds up her phone. "I recorded the whole thing, sir." Every word he said. The general nods slowly. Then he gestures to the room full of silent warriors. "This is what happens when you disrespect one of ours." Caruso looks around. There's no exit. No, he never was. If you believe that bullies should face consequences, stay with this story, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone stand up for a stranger when everyone else stayed silent? But to understand how it came to this, how a humble waiter became the center of a military response, we need to go back 4 hours to a Thursday afternoon lunch rush and a single moment that changed everything. The lunch rush at Maggie's Diner rolled through like it always did. Busy, the kind of afternoon shift Daniel Park could navigate without thinking. He moved between tables with a coffee pot in one hand and a rag in the other. Refill here. Wipe there. Clear a plate. Smile politely. Move on. He was 38, but looked older in certain light. Compact, strong shoulders. Graying at the temples. There was a stillness to him that made people forget he was in the room. At the counter, his daughter Emma sat on a stool with her homework spread out in front of her. She was 7. Small. She scribbled answers into her math workbook, then paused to practice a hand position from her Taekwondo class. Palm strike, block, back to fractions. Daniel glanced at her as he passed. She didn't look up. The diner itself was modest. Vinyl booths, laminate tables, the smell of coffee and bacon grease that never quite left the air. It sat 2 blocks from the base, which meant the lunch crowd was a mix of active duty personnel in civilian clothes, retirees in Marine Corps ball caps, and locals who'd been coming here for decades. Daniel liked. Behind the register, Margaret Chen worked the cash drawer with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd owned this place for 30 years. She was 68, small, gray hair pinned back. She treated Daniel with the kind of respect she gave people who showed up on time and did their work without complaint. Vincent Caruso was another story. He came through the dining room like a man inspecting his kingdom, loud, grinning, stopping at tables to slap shoulders and talk too much. "Semper Fi, brother," he said to a man in a faded USMC t-shirt. "3rd Battalion, right? I can all..." The man nodded politely and went back to his burger. Caruso moved on. He was 52, thick around the middle. Thinning hair he combed forward to hide the bald spot. He wore polo shirts with the diner's logo and khaki pants that were always a size too tight. The walls were covered in his decorating choices: Marine Corps flags, framed photos of drill instructors he'd never met, a shadow box with medals he hadn't earned, a sign near the door that read, "We support our troops," in bold red letters. Daniel avoided him when he could. Caruso's voice carried across the diner now, talking to a table of young Marines about units and deployments he'd read about online. The men listened with the kind of patience military people developed when civilians tried too hard. Daniel cleared a table near the window. Emma turned a page in her workbook. The diner hummed with low conversation. Forks on plates, the highs of the grill, the bell above the door when someone came or went. It was all Daniel needed. Work. Emma home. Nothing that required explaining. Emma looked up from her. "Were you a Marine?" He stopped. "Why do you ask that? Some kids at school said their dads know you. They said you were in the military." Daniel picked up an empty mug from the counter. "I worked with the military a long time ago. Different job." "What kind of job?" "Just a job, kiddo. Finish your homework." She studied him for a moment. Those serious eyes that looked too old for 7. Then she went back to her fractions. Daniel moved to the next table. His hands didn't shake. His face didn't change. But something tightened in his chest. He didn't talk about before. Before was another life, another version of himself he'd walked away from and never looked back. The door chimed. Daniel glanced up out of habit. A man stepped inside. 40s, unshaven. Wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big with torn pockets and stains on the sleeves. His jeans were dirty. His boots were held together with duct tape. A dog walked beside him on a frayed leash. Scruffy, brownish-gray. Some kind of terrier mix. The dog stayed close to the man's leg, ears up, alert. The lunch crowd noticed. Conversations dipped. His eyes scanned the room like he was calculating whether he'd be welcome. Emma watched him. Then she looked at her father. Daniel set down his coffee pot and waited. The man with the dog moved toward the counter. His steps were careful, uncertain. Like he was testing whether the ground would hold, the hostess looked up from her seating chart. Before she could speak, Vincent Caruso cut across the dining room. "Whoa, whoa, whoa." His voice carried over the lunch noise. "No dogs allowed. Health code." The man stopped. "He's a service dog, sir." "I have?" Caruso planted himself between the man and the counter. "No dogs. That's the rule." The man's shoulders hunched. "He's trained. For my seizures, I have the paperwork if you—" "Paperwork?" Caruso snorted. He turned to the dining room, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know how many people try this? Slap a vest on some mutt and claim it's a service animal? It's a scam." The room had gone quieter. Conversations dropped off. Forks stopped moving. Roy, his name was Roy, though no one in the diner knew it yet, stared at the floor. "Then leave the dog outside." "I can't. He needs to stay with me in case." "In case nothing." Caruso crossed his arms. "Look at you. You're filthy. You probably found that dog in an alley, now you're trying to pull some sympathy card to get free food." Roy's face went red. "I wasn't asking for free food." "Sure you weren't." Caruso's tone dripped with contempt. "People like you, you're always working some angle, exploiting loopholes, taking advantage of real rules meant for real disabled people." The dog pressed closer to Roy's leg. Its ears were back. Her pencil was frozen over her homework. Daniel stood near a booth, coffee pot still in his hand. He'd been refilling mugs when the confrontation started. Now he set the pot down on the nearest table. He walked over. "The dog's a service animal," Daniel said quietly. "He's legally protected." Caruso turned. His expression shifted from contempt to annoyance. "This doesn't concern you, Daniel. Get back to work." He has the right to be served. Did I ask for your opinion? Caruso's voice rose. I run this place. Daniel didn't respond. He just stood there. Calm. Still. Roy glanced at him. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. But he didn't say anything. Caruso stepped closer to Daniel. You got something to say? You think you know better than me how to run my business? I'm just telling you the law. The law. Caruso laughed. It was loud, performative. He looked around at the other diners, inviting them to join him. You hear this? The waiter's giving me legal advice now. A few people shifted on. Let me tell you something. I've been dealing with people like him my whole life. Freeloaders, bums. They come in here, they make a scene, they drive away real customers. And you. He jabbed a finger toward Daniel's chest. You're supposed to be on my side, not theirs. I'm not on anyone's side. Yeah, you are. You're taking the side of some homeless guy with a fake service dog over paying customers, over me. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. That was the only sign. You know what your problem is? Caruso was getting louder. Other diners were staring now. You don't know your place. You think because you show up on time and keep your head down that you're something special. But you're not. You're a nobody, a washed-up loser who couldn't make it anywhere else, so you ended up here pouring coffee. The words hung in the air. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't look away. Emma's hands gripped the edge of the counter. I've had enough of this, Caruso said. You're done. You're fired. Take off your apron and get out. The diner was silent now, completely silent. Daniel looked at Caruso for a long moment. He folded it once, neatly, and set it on the counter. He walked past Caruso without a word. Roy was still standing there, frozen. His hands were shaking. Daniel pulled out a chair at the nearest table. Sit. Roy hesitated, then sat. The dog settled at his feet. Daniel walked to the service station, filled a glass with water, and brought it back. He set it in front of Roy. You okay? Daniel's voice was low. Roy nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak. Daniel turned and walked toward the cafe. They walked toward the door together. Margaret Chen stood near the register, her face pale. Daniel. He shook his head. Not angry. Just tired. The bell above the door chimed as they stepped outside. The afternoon sun was bright. The air was warm. Traffic hummed on the street. Emma looked up at her father. Her hand was still in his. Why didn't you fight back? Daniel kept walking. He didn't have an answer. Roy sat at the table where Daniel had left him. The water glass was still full. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Around him, the diner slowly returned to normal. People avoided looking at him. Behind the counter, Caruso was still talking, loud, performing for the staff who had no choice but to listen. You see what happens when people don't know their place. That's the problem with guys like him. No respect for authority, no understanding of how things work. The hostess nodded without meeting his eyes. Roy stared at the water glass. Roy stared at the water glass. His dog pressed against his leg under the table, sensing his distress. 15 years ago, Roy had been a different person. Younger, healthier, full of He'd washed out, couldn't handle the pressure, couldn't meet the standard. Most of the drill instructors had written him off immediately, dismissed him as another failure who'd never belonged there in the first place. But one hadn't. A young senior drill instructor named Park Compact, intense, with a voice that could strip paint when he needed it to, but who'd pulled Roy aside after he'd collapsed during a training run. You're not weak, Park had said. You're undertrained. There's a difference. Park had given him extra time, worked with him after hours, pushed him without breaking him. It hadn't been enough. Roy still couldn't make it through. But Park had treated him like a person, not a problem. Roy had never forgotten that. And when Daniel Park walked through the diner door today, older and graying but unmistakable, Roy had recognized him immediately. He stood up. The chair scraped loud against the floor. His dog rose with him. Roy walked out of the diner into the bright afternoon sun. He moved around the side of the building, away from the windows, and pulled a cheap flip phone from his jacket pocket. His fingers were still shaking. The phone rang 3 times. "Yeah." The voice on the other end was gruff. "Tired. Jerry, it's Roy." A pause. "Roy, long time. You okay?" "No. I need to tell you something." Jerry Kowalski had been Roy's platoon sergeant 15 years ago. After Roy washed out, Jerry had stayed in touch, checked on him every few months, helped him get into VA programs when things got bad. What happened? Roy took a breath. "Sergeant Park just got fired for helping me." Silence. Then, "Wait. Daniel Park? Some guy fired him for defending me when I came in with my service dog." More silence. Roy could hear Jerry breathing on the other end. "Where are you?" "Maggie's Diner, off Veterans Boulevard." "I'll handle it." The line went dead. Roy stood there holding the phone. He didn't know what Jerry meant by "handle it," but he knew the tone. He'd heard it before. The voice of a Marine who'd just been told one of his own had been wronged. 3 miles away, Jerry Kowalski sat in his truck outside a hardware store. He was 50, retired, working construction now. He pulled up his contacts and made the first call. "Gunny, it's Kowalski. You're not going to believe this. Daniel Park is in San Antonio. Someone just disrespected him. We need to move." The gunnery sergeant on the other end didn't ask questions. "Where?" Jerry gave him the address. Second call. An active duty staff sergeant at the base. "Mike, drop whatever you're doing. Instructor Park needs us." "Park? The Park?" "Yeah. I'll explain when you get there. Maggie's Diner. Now." Third call. He opened all of them either trained by Daniel Park or who knew someone who had been. Jerry typed fast. "Instructor Park was disrespected today at Maggie's Diner, Veterans Boulevard. He was fired for defending a homeless vet. If you're in the city, get there now." He hit send. Then he started his truck and pulled out of the parking lot. Across San Antonio, phones buzzed. A mechanic in a garage wiped his hands and read the message twice. He told his boss he had an emergency and walked out. A woman in scrubs at a VA clinic saw the notification during her break. She clocked out early. 2 Marines at the base gym stopped mid-workout. They didn't change. They just left. A retired master sergeant sitting in his living room read the message and stood up without a word. His wife asked where he was going. He just said, "Park needs me." The messages spread. Group chats lit up. Phone calls went out. The network activated the way it had been built, too fast, disciplined, and without hesitation. By the time 12 minutes had passed, the first truck pulled into the parking lot of Maggie's Diner. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms. Cramped kitchen. A living room barely big enough for a couch and a television that only got basic cable. Daniel unlocked the door and let Emma in first. She dropped her backpack by the couch and stood there, not moving. He walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge. She hadn't eaten since lunch. "You hungry?" Emma didn't answer. Daniel pulled out bread, peanut butter, and jelly. His hands moved through the familiar motions. Spread. Stack. Cut diagonal. But his fingers trembled slightly as he set the plate on the counter. Emma climbed onto the stool. "Why didn't you fight back?" Daniel leaned against the counter. "It wouldn't have changed anything, but he was mean to you, in front of everyone." "I know. And you just let him." Daniel didn't have an answer for that, at least not one a 7-year-old would understand. Emma stared at her sandwich. "The kids at school say you were a Marine." He went still. "Were you?" Daniel pulled out the stool across from her and sat down. For a long time, he didn't speak. The refrigerator hummed. Traffic noise filtered through the thin walls. "I worked with the Marines," he said finally. "A long time ago." "What kind of work?" "I was a drill instructor. I trained people." Emma looked up. Her eyes were serious, too serious for 7. "Like a teacher?" "Sort of." "And then you stopped?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Yeah. Why?" He didn't want to do this, didn't want to crack open the past and let it spill into their small, careful life. But Emma was watching him with those eyes that saw everything, and he knew she wouldn't let it go. "Something bad happened," he said, "and I left." "What happened?" Daniel's throat closed. He looked down at his hands, calloused, scarred across the knuckles from an old training accident, hands that had once done things that mattered. "Your mom got sick, and I couldn't help her." The words sat between them. Emma didn't ask what kind of sick. She'd been 3 when Jessica died. She didn't remember much, just fragments, a woman's voice, a smell, the feeling of being held. Images flickered through Daniel's mind unbidden. Himself at 26, campaign cover low over his eyes, standing in front of a platoon of terrified recruits who'd just move, watching them transform over 13 weeks, soft becoming hard, scared becoming disciplined, boys becoming Marines, Jessica beside him in dress blues, both of them young, both of them believing in something bigger than themselves, her laugh in the officers' club, her hand in his, the certainty that they'd figured it out. Then Jessica after. Out of the service, struggling to sleep, flinching at loud noises, the VA appointments that led nowhere. The phone calls Daniel made trying to get her help, hitting walls of bureaucracy and indifference. Her voice. Daniel in dress blues again, but this time holding an infant, Emma, staring at a flag-draped casket. His face empty. His world ended. Daniel blinked. He was back in the apartment. Emma was still watching him. "I'm sorry about Mom," she said quietly. "Me too." She reached across the counter and put her small hand on his. "I think you did the right thing today, helping that man." Daniel's chest tightened. He nodded because he didn't trust his voice. Emma picked up her sandwich and took a bite. She chewed slowly, thinking. Then she said, "That's what the mean man said, but he's wrong." Something broke loose in Daniel's chest. He stood up, walked around the counter, and pulled Emma into a hug. She wrapped her arms around his neck. "Thanks, kiddo." They stayed like that for a moment. Then Emma pulled back. "Can I watch TV?" "Yeah. Finish your sandwich first." She took her plate to the couch. Daniel cleaned up the kitchen, wiped down the counter, put away the bread, tried to steady his breathing. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. A text from Margaret. His first thought was that Caruso had done something else. Trashed his locker, spread lies, found some new way to humiliate him. He almost didn't call back. But Margaret had always been kind to him. Fair. She didn't deserve to be ignored. He was about to dial when the phone buzzed again. Another text. From a number he didn't recognize. "Are you Daniel Park, the drill instructor?" Daniel's hand went still. A third buzz. Different number. "Sir, this is Staff Sergeant Chen." Daniel answered. "Margaret," her voice was shaking. "Daniel, something's happening at the diner. You need to come back." "What do you mean?" "There are Marines here, a lot of them. They're asking for you." 25 minutes after Daniel walked out, the first truck pulled into the parking lot. A newer Ford F-150, dark blue. A Marine Corps decal in the back window. 2 men got out. They wore jeans and T-shirts. One had a unit ball cap pulled low. They walked toward the diner without hurrying. Inside, the lunch crowd had thinned. The hostess was seating a couple near the window when the 2 men entered. They didn't wait to be seated. They walked straight to an empty booth and sat down. The hostess approached with menus. "We're good," one of them said. "Just sitting." She hesitated, then walked away. A minute later, another vehicle arrived. A Chevy Silverado. 3 men this time. They parked along the street and came in together. They took the booth next to the first two. Margaret Chen looked up from the register. She'd been working here long enough to recognize patterns. Military guys came in groups sometimes. But this felt different. Another truck. Then an SUV. Then 2 motorcycles pulling up side by side. The lunch crowd started noticing. People glanced toward the windows. Conversations dipped. 8 more Marines walked through the door within the next minute. Some wore civilian clothes. 2 had unit ball caps with different insignias. 1 was in a mechanic's uniform, grease still on his hands. They didn't order. They just filled the empty booths. Margaret's hands went still on the register keys. The diner was filling up fast. The 4 tops in the center. Marines kept coming. A woman in scrubs. A man in a suit who looked like he'd left work mid-meeting. 2 younger guys in gym clothes. Within 3 minutes, 20 people had entered. Some of Caruso's regulars started getting uncomfortable. An older couple at a corner booth signaled for their check. A man in a business suit left cash on his table and walked out without waiting for change. The Marines were polite, quiet, but they occupied space in a way that made it clear they weren't leaving. They filled every available seat. When the booths were shoulder to shoulder near the door, arms crossed, faces neutral, not threatening, just present, Margaret felt her pulse quicken. She walked out from behind the register and approached the nearest Marine, a man in his 40s wearing jeans and a faded green T-shirt. He had the posture of someone who'd spent years in uniform. "Excuse me, can I help you with something?" The man looked at her. His expression was respectful but firm. "We heard one of ours was disrespected here. We're here to make sure it doesn't happen again." Margaret's face went pale. "One of yours?" "Daniel." "Where's your manager?" the man asked. Margaret's mouth went dry. "In the back office." She turned and walked quickly toward the rear of the diner. Her shoes clicked against the tile floor. The sound felt too loud in the strange new quiet. She knocked once on the office door and pushed it open. Caruso sat at the desk counting receipts. He looked up, annoyed. "What? You need to come out here. I'm busy." "Vincent, now." Something in her tone made him look up. He saw her face and frowned. "What's going on?" "Just come." The moment he stepped into the dining room, he stopped. The diner was packed. Every seat. Every inch of standing room. 25, maybe 30 people and more coming through the door even now. All of them watching him. Caruso's confusion shifted to irritation. "What is this?" He walked toward the nearest group. 5 men standing near the counter. "Excuse me, you can't just stand around. If you're not ordering, you need to leave." None of them moved. Caruso's voice rose. "Did you hear me? This isn't a lounge. You want to be here. You order something or you get out." A Marine. He was younger than most of the others. Early 30s. Still in uniform, Marine Corps service uniform, the kind worn on base during duty hours. Staff sergeant rank on his sleeves. "We're customers," he said calmly. "We're peaceful. We have every right to be here." Caruso's face reddened. "You're loitering. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing." "Just like the veteran with the dog?" the staff sergeant said. The room went completely silent. Caruso's eyes narrowed. "What did you say? You heard me." Caruso pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking slightly. "We're customers," the staff sergeant repeated. "You want us to leave? We'll leave when we're ready." Caruso started dialing. Then he stopped. Through the window he saw another vehicle pulling up. A black sedan. Government plates. Tinted windows. It parked directly in front of the diner. The door opened, and Caruso's bluster died in his throat. The door opened. Two Marine MPs stepped through first. They wore service dress uniforms, white covers, polished brass. They flanked the entrance and stood at parade rest. Service dress uniform with ribbons covering his left chest, rows of them, earned over decades. His bearing was unmistakable, the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. Every Marine in the diner recognized what they were seeing. Backs straightened, conversations stopped. Those in civilian clothes stood a little taller. Those in uniform came to attention. The general moved slowly through the crowded space. His eyes swept the room, taking in the assembled men and women. He nodded to a few. A slight acknowledgement. Recognition. His phone was still in his hand. His mouth hung open. The general stopped directly in front of him. For a long moment, he just looked at Caruso, studying him. The fake Marine Corps flags on the walls. The shadow box filled with medals Caruso had never earned. The man himself, soft, loud, dressed in a polo shirt that was too tight across his gut. When the general finally spoke, his voice was quiet, measured. It cut through the silence like a blade. "Do you know who you just fired?" Caruso's face went pale. Caruso's voice cracked. He was insubordinate. His name is Daniel Park. The general let that sit for a moment. "Does that name mean anything to you?" Caruso shook his head. "No, I don't. He's just a waiter." Just a waiter." The general's tone didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "You have no idea what you've done." He turned slightly, addressing the room now. Phones were out. A dozen people were recording. The general knew it. He didn't care. Daniel Park, he trained over 4,000 Marines. His methods are studied at every training depot in this country. Caruso tried to interrupt. "I didn't." The general raised one hand. Caruso's mouth snapped shut. This man transformed recruits into Marines. He built the Corps' finest. And when his wife, Corporal Jessica Park, United States Marine Corps, died because the institution failed to protect her after she served, he walked away. He didn't make a scene. He didn't demand recognition. He just left. Because he's a man of integrity. And today you humiliated him in front of his daughter because he defended a homeless veteran. A Marine who washed out of boot camp 15 years ago but never forgot the one instructor who treated him like a human being. Caruso's hands were shaking. "I didn't know." "You didn't know because you never asked. You saw a waiter, someone beneath you. Someone beneath you, someone you could bully." The general gestured to the walls, to the flags, the medals, the patriotic performance. "You wear patriotism like a costume. But you never served. You don't know what service means." He turned to the assembled Marines. "How many of you were trained by Instructor Park?" Hands went up. Slowly at first, then more. Then more. More than half the room. A woman near the counter. A man in a mechanic's uniform. Two younger Marines in dress blues. A retired gunnery sergeant who'd driven 20 minutes to get here. A staff sergeant who'd left base mid-shift. All of them had been shaped by Daniel Park. All of them remembered. The general turned back to Caruso. "Do you see them? These men and women came here because one of their own, not because they expected anything in return. They came because that's what Marines do. We take care of each other." Caruso tried to stand straighter, tried to find some footing. "This is my business. I have rights. You can't just—" "We're customers," the general said. "We're peaceful. We're exercising our right to be here. Just like the veteran with the dog." The room was completely silent. "You want to call the police?" The general gestured to the two MPs flanking him. "They're already here, military police. And I promise you, If you try to have these people removed for exercising their lawful rights, you will regret it." Caruso's face was red now. Sweat beaded at his hairline. "You can't do this. I'll call my lawyer. I'll call whoever you want." The general's tone didn't shift. "But understand something. What you did today, disrespecting a man who gave everything to this country, who lost his wife to institutional failure and still had the grace to walk away quietly, while you hide behind fake patriot." He let that word hang in the air. Then he turned to address the whole room again. "This is what it looks like when Marines respond with discipline. We don't shout, we don't threaten, we don't break the law, we just show up, we stand together, and we make it clear that one of ours will not be disrespected without consequence." Caruso looked around wildly, at the Marines filling every seat, lining the walls, standing shoulder to shoulder, all of them watching him with the same quiet, controlled judgment. He had no move left. The general looked at him one more time. "She's on her way. Until she arrives and this matter is resolved, we're staying, all of us, as paying customers." He walked to an empty space near the wall and stood there, arms at his sides, chin level, eyes forward. The two MPs took positions on either side of the door, and 30 Marines settled in to wait. 20 minutes passed in heavy silence. Caruso stood behind the counter. His phone was in his hand again. He kept looking at it, then at the Marines, then back at the phone. He couldn't call the police. The two MPs at the door made that. He was trapped. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I'm calling my lawyer." One of the MPs stepped forward, young, calm. His uniform was pressed sharp. "Sir, if you threaten lawful customers or attempt to have them forcibly removed, I'll place you under arrest for making false statements to law enforcement." Caruso's hand froze. General Hayes, still standing near the wall, spoke without looking at him. "Call Margaret Chen instead. She's the actual owner." Caruso's face went red. "I know who owns this place." "Then call her." Caruso didn't move. Caruso pulled up Margaret's number. His hands were shaking. He hit dial and put the phone to his ear. It rang 4 times before she answered. "Vincent, what's wrong? You need to come to the diner. Right now." "What happened?" "Just come." He hung up before she could ask more questions. Margaret lived 15 minutes away. She made it in 12. Her car pulled up outside, and she hurried through the door, her purse still over her shoulder, her reading glasses perched on top of her head. She stopped just inside. The diner was packed with Marines. Standing? She pushed through the crowd toward the counter. Marines stepped aside to let her pass. "What on earth is going on?" General Hayes walked forward. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Brigadier General Marcus Hayes, United States Marine Corps, retired." Margaret looked at him, at his uniform, at the ribbons. "General, your son-in-law fired one of your employees today, a decorated Marine veteran named Daniel Park. He fired him for defending a homeless veteran with a service dog." Margaret turned to Caruso. Her expression was unreadable. "Is that true?" "The guy had a dog. I told him no dogs. Daniel interfered. He took the side of some bum over me, overpaying customers. I had to. You fired Daniel Park for helping a veteran. He was being insubordinate." Margaret's jaw tightened. She turned to the general. "Where is Daniel now?" "At home. With his daughter." Margaret closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were hard. "Tell me exactly what happened." A woman stepped forward from the crowd. She was in her 30s, civilian clothes. "I was here. I saw the whole thing." "And?" "Your son-in-law humiliated a homeless veteran in front of the lunch crowd. He mocked him, called him a bum, accused him of faking his disability. When Daniel stepped in to defend him, your son-in-law fired him, publicly, cruelly." Caruso tried to interrupt. "That's not..." I filmed it, the woman said. She pulled out her phone. Would you like to see? Margaret nodded. The woman tapped her screen a few times, then turned the phone toward Margaret. The video played, no sound, but the images were clear. Caruso yelling, Roy cowering, his dog pressed against his leg. Daniel walked, Caruso turning on him, pointing, shouting, his face red, his body language aggressive. Daniel standing there, taking it, not fighting back. Caruso pulling off Daniel's apron for him, telling him to get out. Daniel helping Roy to a chair, bringing him water, walking out with his daughter. The video ended. Margaret handed the phone back. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she turned to Caruso. You're fired. What? Effective immediately. You're banned from this diner. Don't come back. Caruso's face went from red to, I'm your daughter's husband. I have rights. I helped build this place. Margaret's voice stayed level, quiet, cutting. You married into this family. You're a co-manager, not an owner. The diner is in my name, and as of right now, you no longer work here. You can't. This is illegal. I'll sue. I'll call my lawyer and call whoever you want. But you need to leave. Now. Caruso looked around wildly, at the Marines, at the general, at Margaret. This is insane. These people are thugs. They threatened me. They exercised their right to be here. Caruso's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Margaret walked to the door and held it open. Get out, Vincent. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were sooner. Leave. Caruso stood there for another moment. His face was twisted with rage and humiliation. Then he grabbed his jacket from behind the counter and stormed toward the door. He had to push past Marines to get there. None of them moved quickly. He squeezed through the crowd, his face burning, and walked out into the afternoon sun. The door swung shut. Margaret stood there, breathing hard. Her hands were trembling. General Hayes stepped beside her. You did the right thing. She nodded. She didn't trust her voice yet. The general turned to the room. Does anyone here know how to reach Daniel Park? 45 minutes after Caruso walked out, Daniel's phone rang again. Margaret's name on the screen. He answered. Margaret. Daniel. Please, I need you to come back to the diner. I don't think that's... I fired Vincent. He's gone. But there's something else, something you need to... I can't explain it over the phone. Just please, come. Bring Emma. The line went dead. Daniel stood there, phone in his hand. Emma looked up from the couch where she'd been watching TV. We're going back? Yeah. Why? I don't know. They drove in silence. Daniel's truck was old. The engine rattled at stoplights. Emma sat in the passenger seat, her backpack at her feet, watching her father. When they turned onto Veterans Boulevard, Daniel saw the vehicles. Trucks lined the street, sub-SUVs in the parking lot, motorcycles. He parked at the far end of the lot and turned off the engine. For a moment, he just sat there. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt. Dad, stay close to me. They got out. The afternoon sun was warm. The air smelled like asphalt and exhaust. Marines stood outside the diner. 20 of them, maybe more. Some in civilian clothes, some in uniform. They weren't loud. They weren't making a scene. They were just there. Daniel walked toward the entrance. Emma's hand found his. One of the Marines noticed him first. A man in his 40s. Instructor Park? Another Marine turned. Then another. Conversations died. People straightened. A woman in a mechanic's uniform took a step forward, then stopped. The crowd parted. A path opened from the parking lot to the door. Marines on both sides. Watching, waiting. Emma's fingers tightened around Daniel's hand. He walked forward, slowly. His heart was pounding, but his face stayed calm. Sir, someone said quietly as he passed. "Instructor," said another. "Dad." More Marines than he'd ever seen in one place outside of a base. They weren't talking. They were watching the door. General Hayes stood near the counter. He saw Daniel and came to attention. Then he saluted. Daniel stopped. His body reacted before his mind caught up. His hand rose. Sharp. Precise. The muscle memory of 15 years in the Corps. He returned the salute. The general dropped his hand. "Instructor Park, I'm Brigadier General Marcus Hayes, retired." Daniel's throat was tight. "Every person in this room is here because of you." Daniel looked around. At the faces, some familiar, most not. All of them watching him with something he didn't understand. "I don't." His voice cracked. He tried again. "I don't know what you're talking about. You trained us, sir. You built us. And when one of our instructors is disrespected, we respond." Margaret appeared beside the general. Her eyes were red. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what Vincent did, what he said to you. If I'd known." "It's okay. It's not okay." Her voice broke. You've never been anything but kind. Professional. And he—" She couldn't finish. The general stepped forward. "We've taken care of it. Vincent Caruso is no longer employed here, and Mrs. Chen would like to speak with you about your position." Margaret nodded. "I want to offer you a partnership, full co-owner, equal say in how this place is run." Daniel just stared at her. "You don't have to answer now," she said quickly. I know this is a lot, but I want you to know that you have a place here, not as an employee. Let's give Instructor Parks a mare." They moved toward the door, not scattered, organized, disciplined. They filed out in loose formation, and once outside they formed two lines facing each other. An honor line. The general gestured toward the door. "After you, sir." Daniel looked down at Emma. She was staring up at him with wide eyes. He took her hand and walked outside. The Marines stood at attention, shoulders back, chins level, eyes forward. Daniel walked between them, Emma at his side. "Thank you, instructor. A man in his 20s. You saved my life, sir." An older Marine graying at the temples. "I wouldn't be here without you." Daniel's vision blurred. He kept walking. At the end of the line, a Marine in dress blues saluted him. Daniel returned it. Then it was over. The line broke up. Marines began shaking his hand, thanking him, calling him by a name he hadn't heard in years. Instructor Park. Emma watched it all. She didn't understand the words, but Margaret appeared beside him. "Daniel?" He turned. "The partnership. Will you consider it?" He looked at the diner, at the Marines still gathered outside, at Emma, who was holding his hand and watching him with those serious eyes. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'll consider it." Margaret smiled. Relieved. "Thank you." The crowd began to thin. Marines saying their goodbyes, promising to come back, shaking his hand one more time. Eventually, it was just Daniel and Emma standing in the parking lot. Emma looked up at him. "Dad?" He knelt down so he was eye level with her. For a long moment, he didn't know what to say. Then he found the words. "I was a teacher, and these people remember what I taught them." "What did you teach them?" Daniel looked at the diner, at the fading afternoon light, at his daughter's face, that strength without compassion is just cruelty, and that you never leave someone behind when they need help. Emma thought about that. Then she wrapped her arms around his neck. Daniel held her. And for the first time in years, the weight he'd been carrying felt a little lighter. 3 months later, Maggie's diner looked different. The walls still had photos, but the frames no longer held generic military stock images or medals Caruso had bought online. Instead, they showed real faces, Real stories. A woman in navy dress, whites holding her newborn, a Marine in camouflage standing with his daughter at graduation, an Army veteran at his small business opening. Each photo had a small plaque beneath it with a name and a single line about who they were. Not performative, just present. The lunch rush had ended an hour ago. A few tables were still occupied, mostly regulars who came in to sit and talk rather than eat and leave. He moved differently now, still quiet, still efficient. But there was an ease in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Margaret came out of the back office with a stack of receipts. She was smiling. "We're up 12% from last quarter. Good. More than good. We're becoming known. People drive across the city to eat here now." Daniel nodded. He didn't need the numbers to know the diner had changed. In the way veterans walked in and relaxed, in the conversations that happened at the tables, this was a place where people were seen. The door opened. Emma walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder. She was still in her taekwondo uniform from class. 7 years old, but she moved with the seriousness of someone much older. She climbed onto her usual stool at the counter and pulled out her homework. Daniel poured her a glass of water. "How was class?" "Good. Sensei says I'm ready to test for my next belt." "That's great, kiddo." The kitchen door swung open. Roy came out carrying a tray of clean dishes. He was 44 but looked younger now. Clean clothes, trimmed hair. The permanent tension in his shoulders had lessened. He'd been working part-time in the kitchen for 2 months. Margaret had hired him on Daniel's recommendation. He had stable housing now, a small studio apartment arranged through a veteran support network that Daniel had quietly connected him with. Roy set the dishes down and nodded to Daniel. "Need anything else before I head out?" "You're good. See you tomorrow." "Thanks, boss." His dog, older now but still alert, walked beside him. Daniel watched him go. Then he turned back to the counter. Emma was practicing her multiplication tables, muttering numbers under her breath. A customer at a nearby table asked for a refill. Daniel grabbed the pot and walked over. The afternoon settled into its familiar rhythm. That evening, after the diner closed and Emma had finished her homework, Daniel drove them both to the cemetery. It was a 20-minute drive. The sun was low, casting long golden light across the hill. Emma followed, carrying the flowers they'd picked up on the way. They walked through the rows of headstones. Daniel knew the path by heart. 3rd row from the oak tree, 12 stones in. Jessica's grave was simple. A flat granite marker with her name, rank, and dates. No flourishes, just the facts. Daniel knelt and brushed a few leaves off the stone. Emma handed him the flowers, white lilies, Jessica's favorite, and he arranged them in the small vase built into the ground. For a moment, he just stayed there, kneeling, silent. It's been a while. The wind moved through the oak tree. A bird called somewhere distant. "I wanted to tell you something. I think I finally understand." He paused. The words were harder than he'd expected. "You would have wanted me to keep serving. Not the same way. But still serving. I see that now." Emma's fingers tightened on his shoulder. "I'm helping people who've already given everything. Trying to make sure they don't fall through the cracks like you did. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's something." He touched the stone. Cool granite under his palm. "Emma's doing great. She's tough. Like you." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Daniel stood up. He put his arm around his daughter, and they stood there together for another minute. Then they turned and walked back toward the car. The sun was setting now. The sky was painted in deep oranges and purples. The temperature was dropping, but it wasn't cold yet. Emma climbed into the passenger seat. Daniel started the engine. As they pulled out of the cemetery, Emma looked over at him. "Dad?" "Yeah?" Do you miss being a drill instructor? Daniel considered the question. Sometimes, he said, I love that work, training people, watching them become something more than they thought they could be. But you don't want to go back? No. What I'm doing now, it feels like a different kind of duty. Helping people who've already served, people the system forgot. That feels right. Emma nodded. She understood. Or at least she was starting to. They drove in comfortable silence for a while. The radio played softly. Traffic was light. Emma pulled out her phone and started scrolling through something. Oh, the tournament brackets for next month. I'm in the intermediate division now. First match is against someone from the North Side Dojo. You nervous? A little. That's normal. Just remember what Sensei taught you. Stay present. Don't overthink. Okay. She kept scrolling. Daniel kept driving. The sun dipped below the horizon. The streetlights came on. The city glowed in the dusk. Daniel glanced at his daughter. Her face lit by the phone screen, her profile so much like Jessica's, it hurt. But it was a good hurt, the kind that meant love. Daniel parked in his usual spot and turned off the engine. The world was quiet. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something close to peace. He and Emma walked up to their apartment together, father and daughter, side by side. And tomorrow he'd wake up and do it again. Serve coffee, listen to stories, help where he could. It wasn't the life he'd planned. But it wasn't the life he'd planned. It was enough.